Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and I'm pretty excited for this review. Today I am looking at Doctor Who The Invasion, the third story of Doctor Who's 6th season, and I have to be plain honest, I watched the entire 8-episode story yesterday evening. I was only intending to watch the first 4 parts first and then the second 4 parts later, like Master Plan with its 12 parts, and later War Games with its 10 parts. They would split into 6 and 6 and 5 and 5, and here it would be 4 and 4, and some of the 7 parts as well to watch. I'll be doing that with Doctor and Silurians, maybe not with him because they're on separate discs. Maybe I'll watch them on the same day, like what I did here. Ambassadors of Death, Inferno and the Daleks are on the whole same disc, and I think I watched Evil the Daleks on the same day. Might have done Marco Polo over too. But it's depending on time, it's possible to see at least 8 episodes. No, not at least, at the most about 8 episodes. So yeah, I watched the entire 8-part story, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoyed these stories. My opinion has gone very high up from this one. I already had a pretty good opinion. I liked it very much, but recent rewatch of all 8 episodes has proven me really like it, and I didn't get bored or dull. In fact, it's the complete opposite, and that's mainly the reason why I continued. I watched the second 4 episodes after watching the first 4. I just thought, I'm enjoying this. I might as well and I've got enough time. I might as well put the second disc on. Might as well watch the remainder of the story, and here we are reviewing this story a day early, or 2 days early, because I usually do if I don't do my reviews on a Tuesday or Wednesday, they'll usually be on a Friday until I stop going to uni on a Thursday afternoon. And Thursday morning was film time, or other activities, or if needed for other things. But yeah, The Invasion. So that's enough about me talking about the story without actually talking about it. So let's move on to the plot. The plot is basically, after the TARDIS fixes itself after the events of the Mind Robber, the TARDIS crew are stuck in space where they are shot down by a missile. They manage to land back on Earth in the 20th century. The year is presumably 1970, and they are on land owned by International Electronics. So they make their way to London, where they discover more about International Electronics. The Doctor and Jamie then go and see the boss, inquiring about Professor Watkins. The boss is Tobias Vaughan, and he seems to be a nice chap to start with, but later on he's shown to be in league with the Cyber Planner, Cyber Planner like one we saw in The Wheel in Space. And they are planning an invasion. And as we learn at the episode 4, the invaders are the Cybermen, and a brand new design. Again, seriously, this is the first, second, third, fourth. This is their 5th story, and it's their 4th design. And even the Tomb of the Cybermen, despite being the ones from the moon base, had a slightly altered design on them. But we can count it as the same design. But so in this case, this is the 4th design over 5 stories. And what's worse, we're going to get 2 more designs before they finally settle on one to use for the remainder of the classic series. I'm looking at you, Earthshock Cybermen. So yeah, although this new design would go on to inspire the Revenge of the Cybermen and the Earthshock / remainder of the 80s Cybermen designs. I know Silver Nemesis has a slight update on those on the Earthshock ones, but they pretty much are the same design, but shinier. Like how the Tomb of the Cybermen ones are just altered versions of the moon-based ones, and the Mondasian new series Mondas and Cybermen, not the Well Enough in Time ones, but the Cybermen in 2011 are basically the 2006 ones without the C on them. So yeah, at least costume-wise, in the case of the new series ones without Cybermen without the C on them, they're supposed to be from Mondas, and along with the Cybermen teamed up to make the new version seen in Nightmare in Silver. Looking forward to seeing what cyber design they bring out for the 13th Doctor when she comes round to meeting them. Not the ones in the escape room. They're still the 2013 design, but next time she actually meets them, discounting the escape room in the next Cyberman story. If she has one, she better have one. She has an escape room with one. They're featuring her escape room, so, and it's not the 5 Doctors. So, she needs to have a Cyberman story. Yeah, poor 3 had to wait till the 20th anniversary to get his. No Cyberman story during the 3rd Doctor's era. Anyway, back to this story. This is, by the way, the last Cyberman story of the 60s, and would be the last Cyberman story until 1975's Revenge of the Cybermen, which is the last Cyberman story until 1982's Earthshock. So, yeah, they went all out on the Cybermen after this story. Yeah, one story that's pretty much their weakest classic series story, maybe their weakest full stop. Yay, I guess. Like the Daleks, the Cybermen weren't very brilliantly treated on their 70s return. But, oh well, still in the 60s at the moment. So, the invasion is after those events, Zoe and Isabel, then the niece of Professor Watkins, and the new friend, go and trying to find the Doctor and Jamie, and then they get kidnapped as insurance for Professor Watkins' activities. And the Doctor and Jamie have to try and find him after meeting up with Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, now promoted to Brigadier, and also meet Sergeant. He's not Sergeant. Rank below, but it's Benton before he's promoted to Sergeant. And we're introduced to him, and we get to see him return in the Ambassadors of Death. We'll get to that eventually. So the Doctor and Jamie have to try and find Zoe and Isabel, and they meet up with Vaughan and Packer again. Packer, by the way, I have to mention, he's the Bennett of this story. If you remember Bennett from Enemy of the World, he was a character who would love to cause harm and be a pretty horrible person and enjoy every single moment of it. Here, it's exactly the same, except this guy has more to do with this. Packer has more of a role in this story. He has more to do. He's like the second main villain, excluding the Cybermen. After Vaughan, he's the second main villain, and he loves being super violent without actually having any blood on anybody. He just loves punching and beating up people, basically, and using physical objects on them. He just loves being a bastard and doesn't care, basically. In fact, episode 8, I see him die, and I'm thinking, no! He was one of, if not the best character of the episode, even though he was a bastard. And not bastards as in illegitimate child, as in a nasty person. So pretty much the modern use of the language of the word as opposed to the original. But can you blame me? He was so fun to watch, and he's even when he gets in trouble, he's still fun to watch. I love his quiet "Yes, sir," or "Yes, Mr. Vaughan." He is also very loyal. He is such a great character, despite being a prick. So the rest of the story, remainder of the first half of the story, sees the Doctor and Jamie having to rescue Zoe and Isabel, and eventually they discover the Cybermen's involvement, and then in the rest of the story, everyone's getting ready to fight the Cybermen, and eventually take them on in a pretty great battle. Some great battle scenes in this story, and some really good stuff. So yeah, the invasion, it's marvellous. It's a marvellous story. First of all, the writing is brilliant. This is based on a story by Kit Pedler, same for The Wheel, I think. That one was adapted by David Whittaker, and this one by Derek Sherwin, who already proved himself to be a brilliant writer with the first episode of The Mind Robber before Peter Ling's also fantastic following 4 episodes. So already we know this guy can do a great script, and he follows it up with a fantastic 8-part story based on one of Kit Pedler's story ideas. So the Cybermen once again get a 5th great story in the 60s. Like the Daleks minus Mission to the Unknown, they had fantastic stories in the 60s. It's going to be a bit more disappointing, especially for the Cybermen, when we get to the 70s. And then a bit more divisive in 80s onwards. But actually, 80s for me, it's a bit more positive than 70s. So yeah. But the new series, it's a bit more of a mixed bag. But 70s aside, classic stories, they were genuinely brilliant. It's just that maybe one exception. And with the Daleks, that can be said for the 60s. But this is just an outstanding story. The Cybermen are great, although their voices are awful. And seriously, stop meddling with the voices. You're making them worse than what they originally sounded. Goodness, the 10th Planet voices are sounding like the best versions at this point. They'll have better voices by Earthshock, I promise you. By Earthshock, you'll get better voices. But the design looks great. They actually look like cyborgs, humanoid cyborgs. They still look like men in silver jumpsuits, but they're looking a bit more menacing. They actually look a bit more robotic, but without still looking partly humanoid as well. Although the voices are still slightly robotic and still pretty awful. Not as bad as The Winning Spaces, but still not as good as 10th Planet or Tomb of the Cybermen. Maybe slightly better than the movies. The one saving grace with this is that they don't have much speaking roles. The Cybermen don't speak as much in this story as they did in the previous or following stories. The Cyber Control Planner, on the other hand, does get quite a few lines across its episodes. So, yeah, and I prefer the Cyber Planner's voice from Winning Space again. Because that one was based on the Tomb of the Cybermen voices. So if we could have a voice like that here, that would have been better. But otherwise, But those are some minor problems. As for everybody else, I think everyone acts amazing. Patrick Troughton, he's brilliant. Kevin Stoney returns. We previously saw him as Mavic Chen in the Daleks Master Plan. He's back as another main villain, as Tobias Vaughan. Here, the Doctor really ought to be wary of people who sound like Tobias Vaughan or Mavic Chen in the future. If they sound like Kevin Stoney and they're not Kevin Stoney himself, they're usually going to be the bad guy. And yeah, in this one's case, I think Vaughan slightly redeems himself by helping the Doctor stop the Cybermen in the end when they betray him. But for the most part, Kevin Stoney characters will be the bad guy. It's like with Philip Maddock. Half the time he's a goodie / to the side. Other half he's one of, if not the main baddie. If not the main baddie. Speaking of Philip Maddock, we'll see him in the next story. But as one of those side characters who's not really a baddie, he's more of an ally. Although one of the articles of my Journal of Popular Television, the article I used for one of my university things, kind of stated he might have been considered the second villain. I mean, if that's his character, that was. But I don't think so. At least not on the same terms as his other Season 6 villain, the Warlord. Or was it? I think it's the Warlord, yeah. Or Solomon. Is it Solomon? From Perenna Morbius. They're not on their levels, more on the levels of the guy from Power of Patrol he played, who was a goodie. Speaking of recurring actors, Peter Halliday is in this story, and he goes on to be in a few other Doctor Who stories, including Remembrance of the Daleks, my all-time favourite. I think if it's the same guy. And I think George Shepherd, who also a reoccurring actor, is also in that story, but he's not in this one. So yeah, but Peter Halliday, this is just an amazing performance from him. He's, like I said, Packer is so great. Fraser Hines and Wendy Padbury continue to be brilliant as Jamie and Zoe respectively. Also we've got Nicholas Courtney is back as Brigadier Lethbridge, as now promoted Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. And he is amazing. I'm so looking forward to seeing him again in Season 7. I already know he's a fantastic character. I've seen all of these episodes, and I know how much of a great character he is. But yeah, going in order, it's great seeing him back. And he seems to be super close with the Doctor. Seems to already be so friendly and chummy with him. And we've not even started the John Pertwee era yet. This is only his second appearance, and he's super chummy with the Doctor. First impressions left a good mark on him. Benton, introduced here, doesn't get a huge amount to do, but I think he does some good stuff. And there's two other guys. There's Captain Knight and another guy. Hawkins, was it? I'm not sure. I'm probably wrong. There's lots of Hawkins elsewhere. But they do some great jobs, and Isabel even gets with one of them at the end. Isabel is actually a pretty good character, but she can be a little annoying at some points, but forgive for being and likeable in other times. And Professor Watkins is also a pretty great character. There's only one character I'm not so worried about, and that's Gregory. He's only got a few minor roles. I think he should have had a bit more to do. His death in Part 6 was a bit wasted. Apparently they had a plan to have a big action scene where Gregory died and they rescued Professor Watkins, and it was either Benton or one of those other two captains who eventually killed Gregory before he had a chance to kill the Professor, or had the Professor at gunpoint. So that would have been a great action scene, but we actually jump over that and we see Gregory reporting to Vaughan about it. It was actually a pretty good transition, though. It was a pretty good cut to the next scene. What wasn't so good was the cut from where Vaughan tells him he has no time at all, and he's now being executed by the Cybermen in the sewers. Yay. There's also some other bits later on where they say, we're going to do something, we're going to do this, and we then cut to, we've done it. We don't really get to see what they did. I like destroying the transmitter. And we also have scenes where they have to wait around for 12 minutes for the Russian missile to hit the Cybermen ship. But they also have some great stuff where the characters are preparing to fight back against the Cybermen using their rockets, and they're being the only ones who are not affected by the pulse or something that's stocking them out. And the cliffhanger in Part 6 is one of the best ones we've ever seen. The actual Cyberman invasion. The only really thing is we don't really do that much with the actual invasion. I mean, they mentioned there's Cybermen on the streets, but we don't really see a huge amount of that. It's more of the fight against them. But if the Cybermen hadn't entered the streets of London, there isn't that much of a difference. The only thing is that the Doctor would have to find another way back into International Electronics in Part 7, then using the sewers. That's the only thing we would have changed, and the Cybermen being on the streets. And that's about it. It's a fantastic story. I do have a couple of nitpicks. I do have a couple of problems, but for the most part, I had a really great time with the story. I really enjoyed it. And also, these are the last two animated episodes of the last two missing episodes to get animated. Well, technically they're the first, but in order, release order, these are the last ones, excluding the segments of Shard that have been animated for the 2017 release of that story. These are the last animated missing episodes, We'll get more animated stories later down the line. A few more. But besides the segments of Shada that weren't filmed, these are the last ones to be animated over missing episodes. And I have to say, Cosgrove Hall did the best ones. I'm standing by that. It did look a bit awkward and off a little bit to start with in episode 1, where the movements of the mouth didn't quite meet with the voices themselves didn't quite match. And the designs aren't 100%, or at least for the main cast, aren't 100% like their main characters, especially Jamie. He looks more feminine somehow. Then again, they do make Zoe and Isabel look even cuter and beautiful, and dare I say, sexier in animated form than in live action. That is an achievement. But like Power of the Daleks, anything they get a bit clunky with the main characters, they more than make up with the backgrounds and the other stuff like the TARDIS, the missile. It just looks so beautiful. And later on, and certainly in part 4's version, they seem to have fixed their voice matching up with the movement stuff, and just get such lovely stuff. And part 4 is a very action-packed episode, just like 7 and 8. Certainly 8. It's just so good. And the first half of the story feels a bit like a spy thriller, especially that first episode. It's a spy thriller mystery, and then halfway through it turns into a race against time for survival, facing off against the Cybermen. So it's really great. Again, like Enemy of the World, more a kind of like Doctor Who does James Bond for the first half of the story, before moving back to a more traditional Doctor Who story afterwards, which is completely fine with me. And like Enemy of the World, I think this story actually does warrant 8 episodes, or at least 6 or 7. It does work with all 8 episodes. I think there was this guy on the documentary that mentions the original Gregory death scene. He mentions that maybe it should have been 4 or 6 parts. You can see where he's coming from, and there's quite a few other stories I would say does need to be shorter. But this story, I think, does work at 8 parts. Maybe it could have been 7, but I think it does a great job at being 8, so I'm okay. The only thing is, I almost had to watch it in 2 halves until I decided to just watch the entire thing. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad I did. I had the full enjoyable experience. I think I enjoyed the first half more with the mystery, espionage investigation, and just some beautiful animation for the missing episodes reanimated. But the second half was also really great and really enjoyable. It had some great moments. So in the end, despite a couple of problems, I'm going to give The Invasion a 10 out of 10. Yeah, definitely the second best Cyberman story so far, second best of season 6, fourth of the Troughton era so far, and one of the best of the 60s. It is so fun, it is so good, and it's really enjoyable. We're more than making up for the mistakes that we had at the start of the season, and for some little bumps in the road from last season. This Invasion is brilliant. It's so great, and it's such a shame that the Cybermen will not return for another 7 years, and when they do, it's going to be in a pretty weak story. In all honesty, it's in a weak story. So yeah, John Pertwee sadly never got to meet the Cybermen until at least the 5 Doctors, on screen anyway. So that's it from The Invasion. Brilliant story. Next time, we'll be looking at another good story, which I find is underrated. It's not as good as The Mind Robber or The Invasion, but I still think it's a pretty strong story of this season. The Crotons. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel.
Sorry about this. Alright.